A few months ago, I was down the road here having my hair cut. I had changed hairdressers. Now, I know, ladies, some of you are really like feeling me right now because this is a huge decision, right? Like to change hairdressers. Okay, the reason I did that was because we'd moved offices, and I felt the Lord say to me, go local, go local. Don't go somewhere where you never meet people, go local. And I just sensed that, well, if it comes to haircuts, I'm going to go to the closest place to where we meet, all right? It's a little Syrian joint just down the road here, and it's been amazing over the last few weeks years, to go to the same place and meet a bunch of stuff. Meet a bunch of people as they do their thing. Now, I don't actually have a hairdresser. I just have whoever is available when I walk in with my 10 quid. Guys, you'll know that. Girls, you're like freaking out right now. Like, okay, it's like, oh, no, don't do that. But anyway, the other day I was having a haircut over there. This is about maybe 3 months ago. I was having a haircut, and this one Syrian guy that I got to know comes in, and he says, he's so excited. And he says, man, I've just had the most amazing Lebanese lamb shawarma. My friend, he says, my friend introduced me to this friend who's just opened this Lebanese place across the road. You must go and have it. And he's just like, he's so excited about his lamb shawarma that he's just had. Of course, I'm sitting there getting hungry, okay. And so, of course, by the time I had my haircut, it was lunchtime, obviously. Whatever time of the day it was lunchtime. And I went to help myself to the Jumbo Express, just down the road. The best Lebanese place in here. Don't let the sign put you off, okay? When you go into Fulham Palace Road, you turn right towards Hammersmith. On the left, a little bit up, is a red sign. It's called the Jumbo Express. I know some people don't like the name or whatever. Don't let that put you off. There's the best shawarma in London is at the Jumbo Express. Some of you are hungry right now, but I'll keep this short so you can go and get yours, okay? And when you meet Rami in the shop, tell him Wolfie sent you, okay? All right. I'm not getting any points or this is not product placement or anything. But don't you love a good introduction? Don't you love it when somebody introduces to someone or something that really helps you, that makes it like, wow, this is amazing. I love to introduce people to each other. I love in the foyer over here to think, what are your gifts? What are your strengths? What do you do? What do you need done? And put people together and then step out the way and that happen. Don't you love it when someone introduces you to something or someone that really is a benefit or someone a new relationship? Okay, so in this Close Encounter series, we are zooming in at some stories where individuals met Jesus in their lives, and on that journey, as they met him, we want to see what happened. What can we learn from these through their experiences, through what Jesus taught and did, and through how they responded during this encounter, and what happened. And of course, the most amazing person I'd love you to meet, I'd love to have the privilege of introducing you to, is the person of Jesus Christ. Right? And some of you still need to meet him. Some of you know about him, but you don't know him. It's one thing to know something about somebody. It's a whole other thing to know somebody, to know them. Some of you really need a reintroduction to Jesus. You need, you have become too familiar with his name. You've become too familiar with what he's done for you. Familiarity is one of the great enemies of any relationship. When we start to take one another for granted, don't we? Familiarity is the greatest enemy of family. When we forget who we're with, when we start to take for one another for granted, as a church, as a congregation, as a connect group, whenever we do the same thing with the same people over and over, the one thing we've got to watch is familiarity, right? I was at a party this week, and I met a guy, and we started talking, and just shallow talking, really. And I just sensed a prompting, go deeper, was what I sensed in my spirit. Go deeper. Have you ever been in a conversation at a party where you just feel the conversation is so shallow, this is a waste of my time? Okay, and I just had that sense, okay, this stuff isn't changing anyone or anything. And I just had a prompting to ask him. I say, because I know him a little bit, I said, how's your marriage going? And he said, it's not actually going that well. And I said, tell me about that. And as he told me about it, I realized that they had just got into a routine, both of them just got into a routine, working too hard. Kids just lost some interest. And I said, you know what? You have married to an amazing woman. She is gifted. She is skilled. She is sexy. Because everybody's sexy to somebody, right? That you can get a date talk right there. Some of you need that. All right? And I said, you know what? The problem is, everybody knows that except you. You've become too familiar with her. So I said to him, listen, in 2 weeks' time I'm going to call you, and you'd better have taken her out for a great date by then. Sometimes we just need to be woken up to who we're with. Woken up to the amazing that is around us, that we are around us. And today we're going to join a guy called Nathaniel. Nathaniel one day meets Jesus, and he's full of questions, he's full of doubts, but something happens in this interaction that changes everything. And at the end of it, he says, Jesus, Rabbi, Messiah, King. He has a revelation of who Jesus is, and he moves from doubt and questions and that are hindering him, got him stuck to this place where he knows who Jesus is. And we want to have a look at his story. Are you ready? Here we go. So we read in John chapter 1 and verse 43. John is one of the Gospels, the stories, the accounts of Jesus' life. So here we read. It says this: the next day, in verse 43, Jesus decided to go to Galilee. He found Philip and said to him, "Come, follow me." Philip was from Bethsaida, Andrew and Peter's hometown. Philip went to look for Nathanael and told him, "We have found the very person Moses and the prophets wrote about. His name is Jesus. He is the son of Joseph from Nazareth." So we see over here that, first of all, this guy, Philip, it says that Jesus went to Galilee and he found Philip, and he said to Philip, "Come follow me." And Philip seemed to say, "Yeah, I'm coming." We don't really get an insight into his encounter, do we? I mean, we hear nothing about how. Aren't you sometimes interested in how people met? I love when I'm with a couple, you say, like, "How did you guys meet? Tell us the story." Isn't that a great story to hear? I love to ask you, if you come to church here, how did you get here? What happened? But in this case, we don't see what happened, but something obviously happened, because Phil is really excited about this, having met Jesus, because he gets so excited that the first thing he wants to do is go and tell somebody else about this person he met. Isn't it easy to introduce someone to a good lamb shawarma once you've had it? You can recommend someone. You can introduce somebody once you've experienced something great. And this is what's happening here, right here. Can I just say, sometimes when we as Christians, can I just talk to us as Christians, if you're not one that you've gotten out here, but if you're a Christian, don't you sometimes feel, sometimes we do a bit of a mess of introducing people to Jesus. It sort of comes out more like religion than relationship. I don't know, sometimes we talk more about the way rather than the one. I want to encourage us. Let's not talk so much about the way someone should go. Let's talk more about the one someone should go to. All right? When you talk about the one, I remember skiing one day up in the Alps. When I used to ski, I snowboard. Now I've made the transition. But I was skiing in the Alps, and I was right at the top of a lift, right on the top of the mountain, and on my own. And at the top, I saw a rainbow across the Alpine Valley, a circular rainbow. Have you ever seen a circular rainbow? Like, man, I mean, that is just, like, you don't see them often, but it is incredible. Of course, I raced down as fast as I could to the bottom to find my friends, because I wanted them to see what I'd seen, right? Now, when I got to the bottom, what do you think I said to them? "Guys, you've got to get in that lift. You've got to make sure you go to the first one. When you get out the first lift, rush across, get in the next one, make sure you get this one to go right to the top." Is that what I'd say to them? Because what are they're going to sit there and say? What are they going to ask me? Why? Why? I don't tell them the way. I tell them the what. What is it? I said, "Guys, I've seen a circular rainbow. You could see it too." And then they're going to ask me what? How do I get there? Where did you see it? And I just want to encourage us. Let's be a little bit. we might make a mess. And if you're not a Christian and someone has made a mess trying to explain Jesus to you, I just forgive them, okay? We just got something in us. Sometimes we're so excited that kind of comes out a little wrong. But I'm hoping that we're going to become very good at introducing others to the Jesus who's changed our lives. Like Philip, something happened in his life that really obviously did something for him. And from that, he wanted to tell Nathaniel. So he goes and he tells Nathaniel about Jesus. Let's see what Nathaniel's response was. So his response is, Nazareth? Because he just said, Jesus of Nazareth. I found the one that Moses talked about. He says, Nazareth? Can anything good come from Nazareth? We'll read the rest of the story and then go back a little bit. As they approached, Jesus said, now here is a genuine son of Israel, a man of complete integrity, or a man in whom there is no deceit. Right? So Jesus looks at him and he says this to him. And then he says, how do you know about me? Jesus replied, I saw you while you were under the fig tree, still under the fig tree, before Philip called you. Then Nathanael exclaimed, Rabbi, you are the Son of God, the King of Israel. Jesus asked him, do you believe this just because I told you I had seen you under the fig tree? You will see greater things than these. This is the encounter. But notice Nathaniel's response wasn't like the same as Philip's, right? Nathaniel says, Nazareth? Can anything good come from Nazareth? You see, I think Nathaniel's got some real struggles going on inside of him. I think he's got questions. Is this really the one? I know you tell me this is the one, but can anything good come from him? And he seems to have some issues that just cause him not to react in the same way as Philip. You know, each of us have our own story of how we respond when we're introduced to Jesus. You have your story. You have your reasons for being hesitant. You have your reasons for being joyful. Some of it did it very easily. Others struggle. Others have to work through. And Nathaniel was one of the guys in the Bible that needed to obviously work through some stuff before he would say yes. You know, my friend Rami that I told you about just now, after a few times going in there, because I haven't just been there once, okay? Once you like something, you just stick with it. I was chatting to him over the counter as he was making me that lamb shawarma. And we got talking, and he asked, we got talking about spiritual things, because I typically get asked, what do? I say I'm a pastor, I lead a church, and then I pause a little bit, and I say, are you interested in spiritual things? That's my chat-up line. And so he said, I grew up as a Christian. But then what happened in my nation was so terrible. He says, I used to believe, but I can't believe anymore. So when you do go and get your lamb shawarma, pray for him. But that's the reality, isn't it? Sometimes we face such big things in our lives that are real obstacles. And what's the answer for me? What's the answer to Deo today? It's not some flippant answer, is it? It's just empathizing. It's just being with. It's just saying, hey, I understand. That's not the moment to come out with your answer, is it? Or Gaynor, we know a year ago, or just over a year ago, your husband passed away, and we stood here with you as well. It's not easy. These things can become huge obstacles. We have questions, we have issues, we have doubts, we have things that have happened to us that cause us. The Bible is full of people who had questions, didn't they? David, Job, Gideon. God's got a great promise. You are going to use you to free this nation. Who, me, God? And then he says, if you are this God, then why? And we all have those questions, right? Why, how, when, what, who? And these issues can really become obstacles. And they were an obstacle for my friend Rami. And they were an obstacle for this Nathaniel over here. And we're going to look at the rest of his story in a moment. What happened for him to move from that place to saying, Rabbi, King. And so I'm going to do our close encounter interview today, and I'm excited to ask David Barker to come forward here. And we're going to listen to David's close encounter story, his journey of coming to Christ and that journey. And then we will go, you park yourself there. And then we will, by the way, this is just the point so far. God doesn't mind you coming with your questions and with your doubts. Is that okay with you? Have we established that today? God doesn't mind you coming with your questions and your doubts. All right? And so today I want to introduce you to David Barker, and we're going to do a little close encounter story. Great to have you here, David. Now, we've known each other probably for about just over a year or so, okay? And I know you are a believer now. I had the privilege of doing your wedding in Italy, Sophia over there. I've got a picture actually, okay? There's some pictures from, this is a 3-day wedding in a castle up in Tuscany, okay? They didn't have lamb shawarma, but it was amazing, okay? So it's just been privileged to be a part of your wedding. And of course, we've known Sophia for a lot longer, but you guys got married and you decided to join Sophia here. I know Pastor Simon Downham, where you gave your life to the Lord, and I thanked him this week for you coming here. Okay.
Not there.
All right, not there. Right. We always have this tension when people get married, where they're going to go, okay? And we sort of trade. Okay, we trade. We make offers, reduce tithes and all that thing, just whatever it takes. Anyway, no, I'm kidding. Here we go. David, tell us a little bit about what are you doing in London now?
Well, I'm a tech entrepreneur, and I'm on my third tech company called the Tech Centre, and we do tech for social good. So we do projects that help change lives, mainly by helping charities and social enterprises. We've also innovated pop-up training academies to train long-term unemployed to help them get into work as well.
Fantastic. Now, I saw something on your Facebook post this week. You have a dream. Tell us about that dream.
Oh, yeah. So it's important to have goals in life. Yeah. So my 10-year goal is to be the Lord Mayor of London. The Lord Mayor of London.
The Lord Mayor of London.
There's only one Lord, but we have to exist in these existing structures. And in 20 years, the Secretary General for the United Nations.
Come on.
In 20 years. So,
all right. You heard it first at Every Nation London, okay? David, that's fantastic. And I know you've got involved in local politics, and really, this is not just a pipe dream. You're making it work, and that's you. I mean, you make things work. But let me ask you, growing up, what was your spiritual life like? Were you a Christian in a Christian home? Just describe that for us.
No, so I come up from a place called Moston, which is a poor community in Manchester, where many people say nothing good comes from Moston. I grew up without any faith. But actually my first experience of the church was when I was 17. My brother died of cancer, and it was tough because he got cancer at 13. It was a real struggle for him. He died at 19, which is hard because he was such a good person, and it makes you think, why does this happen to good people? And you wrestle with that, and my parents wrestled with that, and they started going to church, and I was like, and for me, I wasn't angry at God or anything. These things do happen, but you wrestle with the why. And so anyway, they said, come to church, and I said, okay, well, I'll come this Sunday. So I went along, I went in agnostic, came out an atheist, which I know is not the normal thing, but
what happened?
It was a sermon on if you die as an unbeliever, you go to hell. And for me, sitting there was, obviously my brother wasn't a Christian, not because he wasn't a good person, I felt he'd never met Jesus and never had the chance to really. So yeah, I just went, if that's God, it's not for me, and I walked out. And that was I closed the door, I turned my back on the church, and I went my own way.
Wow, that makes me really challenged. That what happens when people come into this room. I hope that they know the grace of God and the full gospel of God. But so you walked out. Just describe the next. What happened next in your life?
Well, I was actually unemployed at 16. I was what we now call not in education, employment, and training. I had this big dream of getting into technology. This is 1987. My careers advisor at school said, "It's not possible. You're from Moston. You're poor. You're not going to college. You cannot get into technology." I didn't believe him. I left school without his help because I wanted to try. Fortunately for me, the hero of this story was Margaret Thatcher. was my hero, and the reason why she launched the youth training scheme, the YTS program. And that was it. I got an apprenticeship with a local company doing tech, and my career grew. And then 7 years later, I became one of the first UK internet entrepreneurs in 1994, and then grew that company over 10 years with global corporations, basically driving the globalization of the internet with Intel and Microsoft and the Cisco's. Got very wealthy, very rich. So by 2004, I was in the top 1%. That's what they say, and that's where I was.
Yeah. And then you came to sort of a moment where you gave all that up and went searching.
Yeah, for a couple of years, because I was traveling the world, you know, you're with rich people saying how great capitalism is and it trickles down and helps the poor, and I'm like, have you seen the places I've walked through? And you walk through communities, more homelessness, more crime, more unemployment, and I was struggling with that, you know, being rich, seeing that, and hearing this lie, really, that actually, and it could happen, I believe it could, but it's not. So I decided in October 2004, I walked into the managing director's company, of the company, and I resigned. I said, look, I want to leave, I'm going to do this, I'm going to focus on unemployment, poverty issues. They said I was having a midlife crisis, and I said, look, my mission changed, and I said, like, no more globalization, I want to tackle global poverty issues.
Okay, so God wasn't in fact a factor at that point, that decision, that wasn't it?
Yeah.
But obviously you're a believer now. What were some of the catalysts on that journey from there to you coming to Christ?
Well, I made that statement. I want to get involved in the broken world, and I thought, well, that's going to be a big journey. So I thought I'll take a break, and I went traveling. I had my itinerary, and just before I left, I started getting pains in my neck, and I went to see a chiropractor, and he was cracking my head as they do, and he said, "What are you doing for Christmas?" And I gave him my itinerary, and I said where I was going, and then we got to a certain point. He said, "Do not go there. You mustn't go there. You need to go east. There's a great island. It's beautiful. It's much better. Go east." And I was like, yeah, whatever. So anyway, so we were traveling to what was planned, because I'm one of those you plan and you deliver, and you don't change it on a whim. Mm-hmm. And I was just going, and I thought, you know what? Let's do this. Let's go on this whim. Let's go east. It was an amazing island. It was beautiful. And on this specific day, we got into town, and that was the day of the tsunami. And we were going to be in Phuket on Boxing Day. We would have been dead on the beach. And and this stranger told us to go a different way. But
you didn't connect the dots at that time. God was intervening.
Exactly. That was like, wow, that was so lucky. It gave me more resolve in my mission. But I came back, and what happened the next 12 months of going into it, and actually what it was about was I traveled the world. I went to China, Palestine, Russia, Germany, looking at why do we have so much poverty and unemployment. And there were so many dead ends, so many metaphorical tsunamis of you can't come this way, it's a dead end, give up, go back to your rich life, you can't do this. So many of that through that journey. And after 12 months of these mini tsunamis, having faith to continue, and then the miracles were happening. Mm. And even to a point where basically after this research, I innovated this big idea of a tech company using its growth to train long-term unemployed. I needed £1 million. I'd run out of money, but I'd done the research, I'd done the prototype. I had everything to do this, but I didn't have £1 million. I'd run out of money. I'd actually was being threatened with eviction. I couldn't pay my rent.
You were living in London?
In London, yeah. It's dark time. And how do I get this £1 million? So I pitched it to trust foundations, government, everybody, and they loved it. They could see it, but trust and foundations were like, we'll be just one person, you can't do this. I thought, well, I need the money to build the team, but they didn't quite get that. And normal investors are like, look, we want you to maximize shareholder profit, not help people, so we're not going to invest in your tech company. So I was in this social enterprise vacuum. And anyway, so I ran out of money. I was literally getting evicted. I couldn't afford to live. And then I got a phone call from a very rich businessman who met with me. I used to know in my previous life. He said, I've heard you've left your company, what you're doing. So I shared my story just like this. He said, that's a great story, admirable, but it's over, it's dead, you can't do this. Come run my company, I'll make you rich again. You're going to have this amazing life. And that could be, people might think that's the godsend, I'm crushed, can't go forward. But actually for me, that was a temptation. Now I can look back and that was temptation. There was something to get me off this course, because I said no, I'm going to keep going on this journey. And the next day, 2 miracles happened. Suddenly the money started to flow. And actually what actually happened after that meeting with the businessman, I went home. And I knew my life was over. I knew I'd decided to keep pressing in even though it was darkness. And in the dark of night, I said, God, what am I going to do? And everybody actually says that, when their life's nearly over, God, what am I going to do? And this thought came in my head of, you've got the skills. And it's one of those thoughts that pop in your head, like, who said that? Because I'm sure, where did that come from? So you've got the skills. And then the next day, money started to come in on some bits of work. And then I thought, you know what, you're right, I have got the skills. I'm going to create a new company to make $1 million and use the $1 million to develop the social enterprise. And that was it. So for the next 4 years, that's what I did. Made the $1 million to do that. But what I did then was worked in a homeless shelter, shared my story of the last 12 months with a guy in the soup kitchen. He said, this is God, this is so good. And I was like, no, it's not. And he said, look, go on an Alpha course. St. Paul's Hammersmith, sounding down, and took me on a journey. First 5 weeks, resisted. Second 5 weeks, just like Nathaniel. I turn around and paint. It's like painting the dots of a join the dots picture. As I joined the dots, it has to be God. It has to be Jesus. And that is amazing to feel like actually I'm co-creating this, not just something I'm doing myself.
Wow, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Just lastly, what difference has being a Christ follower made in your life?
For me, Jesus brings comfort and he brings direction. When I just said that statement, I made £1 million to do. That was a very hard journey. Actually, the first 2 years I made $750,000. I was flying, doing this. God, come on, this is amazing. Look what we're doing here. Nearly finished, and we're going to start changing lives. But then we entered the year of the recession, and this company owed us money. They didn't pay us the bill, so it put me back into poverty. All my suppliers down to us, and look, we can't work for you. You need to pay us. So I was in this. They've not paid me. I can't pay you. Bad business behaviour. But I was stuck, so I had no money. Being threatened with action. The next week, my mum phoned me. My dad just got cancer. Brought back the memories of my brother. So I'm like, God, God, you sent me this way. You gave me this direction. Now I can't pay my bill. I'm getting threatened with eviction. Dad's got cancer. I'm like, I must be so off track. And God brought the comfort because he said, look, if I'd have told you this was going to happen, you wouldn't have gone, would you? Mm. Possibly not. So but this was where you were going. This was the destination. Trust me, this is the path. Have comfort in that, because in the future you're going to work with world leaders, you're going to be doing so many amazing things, but right now you're just going to have to walk through this darkness. And that darkness lasted a year. As a year of, I had no way of raising money, no way of raising finance. I was still stuck in this poverty trap. And then after a year, I was broken, tired. I said, God, surely I must be off track. He said, no, keep going. I said, I can't, I'm physically worn out. And I knew in myself, next Monday, this is over. And I said, God, I really believe that, and it has to be because I can't go on anymore. I'm just worn out. And I went through that next week, didn't sit at home. I pressed in, networked, met people. People said, come for breakfast, come for lunch. We got this breakfast on Saturday morning at 7 a.m. I had to get up at 6 a.m. I was shattered. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to go. Monday, this is over, however that's going to look. And I just have to finish this. And I went to this breakfast. It was an amazing breakfast, not a shawarma. But it was bacon rolls. And we were all leaving, and I saw this guy at the window, and I said, are you okay? And he looked confused. He said, no, I'm not okay. I live in Bath. I got up at 4 a.m. God told me to come. I'm not going home. Do you want to go for lunch? We went for lunch. He told his testimony. I told him mine. He said, this is phenomenal. I can't give you a lot of money, but I could give you a little bit, like £1,000. What if I gave you £1,000? I said, look, I've not come here for money. If you feel called, then thank you very much. That'll keep me going for another month. I'll find a way out. And anyway, he said, right, so he took my sort code account number, and on Monday I logged into my account looking for 1,000. He didn't put that in my account. He put in £25,000. Come on. Tuesday, he put another £25,000, and on Wednesday, he put in another 25. So literally, he wrote off that debt. The lights came back on. We paid off our suppliers. The money flowed in again. The recession was over. 3 months later, we finished this new innovative company. We launched it, and as soon as we launched it, the Labour government turned around and said, this is just what we need. There's a £2 million contract. And we opened 7 academies across the UK. Took long-term unemployed, 19 years unemployed, now working on this innovative program. But it was that comfort and direction that got me through the darkness.
That's brilliant. Come on, let's give David a hand. Wow. David Barker for the next Lord Mayor of London. Thank you, man. Wow. Wasn't that a great story of introductions, of connections, of perseverance? And we all have our own close encounter story, or maybe you don't have one with God. And I really trust that you'll think about what is your story and what isn't it, and that this will be some catalyst to get you going. Let's have a quick look at some lessons we can learn from Nathaniel's story, and just in addition to what we've already learned from David's story up there. So when Nathaniel has these issues, these questions, Philip has a great answer. Just come and see. Do you ever think that you don't have the answers? You don't have all the answers. I mean, here's someone dumps all their issues on you, their questions, and you just don't have. Philip just says, hey, come and see. And I hope we can be confident to say, come and see. Just come to where I am, and let's see what happens. But then he carries on and says, as they approached, I love this fact that Philip was able to at least persuade Nathaniel to come and see, and that Nathaniel was willing to get a little bit over his stuff to at least approach. Would you agree? I mean, that is a great spirit. Sometimes we are stuck, and we're so stuck that we won't even change our mind. You say, don't confuse me with the facts. I've made up my mind, It's like you close. Your mind is so closed, just nothing goes in or out anymore. But here's a man who, even though he's going through stuff, something in him is desiring something more. Something in him is desperate enough to get him to at least approach. And as he approaches Jesus, something amazing happens. Jesus looks at him and he says something really encouraging. And everybody's listening. Do you ever it's one thing for someone to say something to you personally, right? One-on-one. It's another thing for someone to say something good about you in front of others. Don't you feel that? Like that's a whole nother level, I mean, this week I got a few people texting me, thank you, just seemingly random, but just at good moments for me to just feel like, yeah, this is good. I'm on the right track, and that's great. But isn't it great to hear that in company with others listening? Someone's bragging on you, like, that's my man. When I was an under 10 rugby player, my rugby coach, we were huddled together after a game, and my under 10 rugby coach said, you know what, team? I wish I had 10 Wolfies on this team. Man, Wolfie just went like, whoa, that is cool, man. Those words that people speak of you mock you, but here's something. Jesus speaks something good over. He sees something in Nathaniel, and of course, despite his doubts, his stuff, Jesus sees something good in him. Last week I spoke about the principle of honor. Remember that? If you were here, the principle of honor is this, that when you accurately discern, understand, and recognize the gift in somebody, and you honor that gift, you release its blessing to yourself and to those around you. So when you recognize the good, the gift in somebody, it releases the blessing of that gift to you and to others. And this, I think, is what Jesus is doing here. Nathaniel comes to him, and Jesus recognizes and calls the good out of him. Whatever Philip and the other boys thought about him, Jesus sees something good in him. Wouldn't it be awesome if we as a community in our lives would recognize more good in people rather than just seeing the negative stuff? Like, hey, Jesus, I want to introduce you to this guy. He's got loads of doubt. He doesn't think anything good can come out of Nazareth. That's a bad introduction right there, right? How about if we just spoke, if we saw good in people, if we were there to build people up, encourage. The word encourage is the word entheos, to put the Spirit of God inside of somebody, to speak words of life into them. Someone once said that if you think something good about someone, say it. Never just think it. Don't just keep it to yourself. Say it, text it, write it, post it, whatever. Good stuff. Get it out of you. Because we all need encouragement, right? And I don't know, Nathaniel was probably like, isn't anything good come out of Nazareth? He's dragging himself behind Philip. Maybe Philip's dragging him, persuaded him, if you come to church, I'll take you for a shawarma. Whatever he did to get him there. And he called something good. But there is a big problem here. Because then Jesus says, then Nathaniel says this, how do you know me? Because Nathaniel knows himself. And Nathaniel knows that although somebody has spoken something good over him, he knows all the bad about himself. He knows, how do you know me? And Jesus said, I saw you under the fig tree. The fig tree in the Bible is symbolic for many things, but the first mention of the fig tree it's the third tree mentioned in the Bible, is where Adam and Eve were plucking the fig leaves off the tree, right? And so associated with guilt and with shame. I don't know what Nathaniel was doing under the fig tree, what he was thinking or what he was doing, but he was obviously concerned how did Jesus know what I was doing? I think I'll propose to you, it had something to do with guilt and shame. Something was going on that nobody knew about, and now Jesus says, I saw you under the fig tree. Basically saying, Nathaniel, I know you. How many of us, our greatest fear is actually the fear of being fully known? Okay, we want to be known. We want to be known for the good stuff. But there is something in us that fears being fully known. I'm not sure if I'm alone in this room. Our great desire, I believe, is to be fully known, yet fully loved. But we fear that if we were fully known, we would be rejected. If someone really knew everything about you, everything, the stuff you do when nobody's looking, the stuff you do when, that nobody knows about, the things you think about that you won't share with anybody else, your questions, your fears, the things that produce guilt and shame. We've just seen the two candidates in the election, have their lives, investigated, put under the microscope, all the rubbish dragged up for all of us to see. And it's amazingly, it's just nice to talk about other people's stuff, is it, what they got up to. But what if the tables were turned and the cameras zoomed in on your life and the reporters came after my life and they looked at the deep stuff and my good, my bad, and my ugly was exposed? How would I feel about that? And I think Nathaniel's going through some of that. I, over the last few months, have had some real guilt over my life. I have feared something being exposed in my life that I did this summer. And this week, I was exposed. See, when Ali and I attended the wedding of David and Sophia, we rented cute little Fiat 500. And we drove straight from the airport at Rome into Rome. And we drove into the no traffic zone in Rome. And I took Ali on this amazing drive through Rome. The Colosseum was right there. I mean, like my private tour to my wife. But of course, you're not allowed to do that. And for the last few months, I have been living in fear of getting a letter from Rome that I had violated the law and I would get a fine. I've been searching quietly on the internet. What happens when you drive into the zone, no traffic zone? And, you can read, just fear's been building up. And this week, I got my letter from Rome. It said, we saw you. We fear being seen. There's some things we don't want anybody to know about. Some things like, how can I sort that out? Can I just get that away out of my life? And I think Nathaniel had this fear of being fully known, yet something is happening there. I got this letter from Rome, you see. And I think as Jesus saw good in me, he's wondering, can God see the good in me but overlook the bad in me? Okay, what is God? Does he hate my sin? Does he hate the stuff that's causing guilt and shame? Or does he see good? And we have this thing, and the only way to sort that out, I think, is through the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ. The good news of God is what sorts that dilemma out. That yes, God's created me in his image. Yes, he's put gifts in me. Yes, there is amazing in me. But yet there is darkness. There is sin that separates me from him. There is stuff that causes guilt and shame and drives me to the fig tree. And I try and get there to cover up myself under the fig tree and hide from God and be separated from others and being guilt and shame and all that stuff. And in that, you don't need to receive a letter from Rome. There was also another letter, and it was written to Rome, right? And so I think some of these things, listen, so the point here really is here that, first of all, the big point of today, we're going to land this soon, okay? The big point today is that although God fully loves you, fully knows you, he fully loves you. Do you get that? I think our great desire is to be fully known, yet fully loved. This is covenant love. This is perfect love. And I think this is what happens over here. But in the letter, there's another letter, not the letter from Rome, the letter to Rome, okay, to the Romans. In the Bible, the letter to the Romans. This is the gospel, the good news. So in Romans 3, verse 26, this is the bad news part of the good news. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Everybody has sinned, okay? We've all got stuff that we're hiding. Okay, secondly, the wages of that sin is death, a breaking of relationship. We've all not made it. We've all missed the mark. And then it says, then it changes gears, but the free gift of God is eternal life through Christ. So there is a way out, there's a restoration that is promised in the gospel. In Romans 5, verse 8, it says, but while we were in sin, but God demonstrated, showed his love, his great love by this, that when we were sinners, Christ died for us. The fine that is owing has been paid. Hallelujah. I don't need to receive the letter from Rome because Christ has canceled the debt for me. This is the good news. What the law could not do, what I couldn't do by keeping the law, God did by sending his son. Friend, and I think these sorts of truths are rummaging through Nathaniel's head as he's trying to process this. This is rummaging through. And Tim Keller says it this way. He says, the gospel is this. The gospel is this, that we are more sinful and flawed in ourselves than we ever dared to believe. As much as we don't even know the extent of our wickedness. Jesus said, you've heard it said, but I tell you, and he dives deep into the thoughts and intents of our hearts. But then Keller says this, yet at the very same time, we are more loved and accepted in Jesus Christ than we have ever dared to hope. Isn't that awesome? And Hebrews 4 says it this way. Hebrews 4 verse 13 says, we are all of us, all of creation, all of us. Nothing is hidden from God. Okay? Nobody's hiding under fig trees and isn't known. He says, everything is naked and exposed before his eyes, to whom we must give an account. Now that's tough, right? So we like, you saw me under the fig tree? Yes, I did. And then there is this amazing, great promise. And here's how it reads. It says, but we do not have a high priest who can't sympathize with our weaknesses. But he was tested, tempted in every way as we are. Everything that drove us to that hidden, that shame. He says he was tempted, yet without sin. That's why he could take our place. That's why he could pay the fine that I needed to pay, you needed to pay. He says, because of all this, let us come boldly to the throne of grace to find help in time of need. And I think Nathaniel was sitting there and he's listening to this, and maybe then he remembers, because he didn't have the New Testament, right? He didn't have the letter to Rome at that point. He didn't have these truths. But he saw in Jesus the fulfillment of what the prophets had spoken, like the psalmist had said, that he removes my sin as far as the east is from the west. Why the east from the west, north from the south? Because you can measure north to south, but you can't measure east to west, all right? The psalmist says, listen, one is coming who remove my sin as far as the east is from the west, that you remember it no more. Maybe Isaiah chapter 1, maybe he remembered something that he'd heard. He said, God's saying, let us reason together through the prophet. He says, let us reason together. Come. Though your sin be as crimson, you will be made white as snow. And as I think as Nathaniel is having this encounter, some of these revelations come to him, and this is the cry that he makes. He says, Rabbi, you are the Son of God, the King of Israel. Something comes out of him, and he acknowledges God for who he is, Jesus for who he is. The word rabbi just means one of honor, and I think here the tables are turned again. Jesus, or Nathaniel, through the principle of honor, recognizes Jesus now for who he really is. He's the King. He's the Messiah. He's the one of whom the prophet had spoken, and he's the one who's fulfilled now. He's the King of all kings. And he says, and in that declaration of his mouth, he makes a confession. I believe in Christ, the one who will come and see all my sin under the fig tree, and he will wash my sins away, and He will take my place, and I can come out fully known yet fully loved. This was an amazing God encounter. And once Nathaniel recognized that, the response of Jesus was, listen, now that you know me, you will see greater things. And I believe that when we have an encounter with Jesus and we really recognize who He is, the resurrected Christ, and Paul often prayed, he said, oh, that I may know you. Don't think you know Him like you can know Him. Right? Paul said, I pray that God will open your eyes that you would see. You would see more. You'd see the power that God worked when He raised Him from the dead. I want to encourage you, don't just accept, I know Jesus. You can know about Him, you can know Him, but you can know Him more, we can know Him more. And as I think as Nathaniel has a revelation of Jesus, Jesus is able to say, Nathaniel, now that you know me like this, you will see greater things. And sometimes we can't receive from God because we're not willing to press in, to pull the curtain back and believe and see and believe who He really is. And I want to encourage you, just this week, consider, who do you really believe Jesus is? Because when you acknowledge who He is, you release all His gifts, all the blessings of Christ into your life through the principle of honoring who He really is in your life. I pray this week you will have an amazing God encounter, friend. And you can also go in faith, believing that the things that God has spoken to your life will come because you've had a revelation of Jesus Christ.